Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. I am Jer Stays, and joining me on the line is
Norris Howard.
So good to hear from you, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a pretty wild weekend. Been all over the Midwest, and happy to be back home.
For sure. We were in Chicago at the same time. We weren't able to link up, but we both had pretty different experiences. I had a few things to talk about over the next few shows, but one in specific I want to talk about, kind of in the where we've been area, is that you heard about this Jollibee coming to Sterling Heights, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd never been to Jollibee before.
Yeah. Remember we talked about that. Did you get a chance to go?
I did. And let me tell you, you see the bee from like a block down, and it's ridiculous. Like, I don't know what kind of fever dream this bee came out of, but I mean, I think I appreciate the bee the most out of all of this. There's even a selfie of me with the bee.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I haven't been in many years, and I didn't even go in America.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think I'll have to re-up.
Now, I want you to think back. It might be a little hard if it's been a while. I want to see if there was a difference between the two, because when I went, and it was busy. It wasn't lines, but it was constantly moving. Tons of people coming through there for this Jollibee. I never knew that banana flavored sauce, because that's what that is, on spaghetti, dyed red with hot dogs, would be something that I could eat. Like, I didn't feel awful about it. Like, I didn't revolt against it. I didn't love it, but I was very, very confused by this spaghetti.
Listen, I think the palate at a place like that is not the typical Midwestern person's palate, and I think it'll take some getting used to. But if you are into that sort of food, you are happy that you finally have that option. It reminds me very much so of when I was in London and we couldn't find tacos. And then I just realized, like, oh, Mexico's not over here. And so it was a bit hard to find a taco. And like, you just sort of think about those sorts of things as like different sort of restaurants and chains and things just cater to different sensibilities. And Jollibee, I think, caters to a sensibility that we, or a palate that we just haven't really explored much in this part of the country. So I'm excited to see where it leads. If I'm out that way, I'll try it again. Because like I said, I don't even remember what I ate last time I went there. So it'll be interesting, that's for sure. But I know, fans of Jollibee are very excited about it. And it does cater to a group of folks that I think haven't had those options in Metro Detroit previously. I think it's just a net positive in general.
Oh, for sure. I will say to the uninitiated, the magic's in the gravy. Like, you dip everything in gravy. And that's a thing. And I understand why the magic's in the gravy. The other thing I noticed about this trip, and I don't think I really want to throw this place under the bus for it, I think it's just a change in general. I'm becoming, as I've kind of, changed how I've eaten in the last few years, trying to be a bit healthier, I've noticed salt a lot more in things. Is that just me?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's a getting old thing.
Oh, gosh. The old geezer here.
Yeah, you just gotta watch your salt.
Sign me up for the Denny's special and the moon's over my hemi.
Yeah, just watching your blood pressure and stuff. This is all good. I mean, I've become the same way, but with sugar.
Okay.
I've gone like, why is sugar even in this? This is stupid. Salt's a little different. I mean, it's used in everything. Anything that has preservatives is just gonna have a ton of salt in it. But yeah, I think that's just more so like an old fogey thing to be worried about.
As the Daily Detroit's resident old fogey at this point.
No dish, Jerry. You know I love you.
You got to go to something I'm very jealous about, even though we were in the city at the same time. You got to go to a very cool event.
Yeah, so I was able to check out the U.S. women's national team, the soccer team, out in Chicago at Soldier Field. They played South Africa, won 2-0. But it was also Megan Rapinoe's last match. If you are unfamiliar with Megan Rapinoe, she's the sort of the outspoken face, if you will, of the U.S. women's national team. She was one of the first athletes to take the knee during the Colin Kaepernick saga. She's been outspoken in terms of equal pay for female athletes. Seeing this be her last match, it was bittersweet because as much as we'll miss her quality as a player, I think we'll miss her quality as a personality and as somebody who stood up for change. And I just feel like we're in an era now, definitely in sort of the post-COVID, post-George Floyd era, where you're sort of not seeing athletes perhaps take the stands that they were taking at that time, where, just a wave of protest action was sort of accepted. But the thing is these issues didn't go away. They're not all of a sudden solved just because we decided we can go back to the office now. So her presence will be missed, I think, in the greater sphere of sports in the United States. And we'll see what she ends up doing. But the match itself was fantastic. We had great seats, great turnout. I fully converted my wife into at least an international soccer fan, so mission accomplished.
Yeah, I saw a couple of pictures, and that was absolutely awesome. How many Michiganders did you see?
Yeah, that was the interesting thing, too, because as we were sort of filing into the arena, we saw a lot of Michigan plates, which is not crazy because, for those on the west side of the state, between there and Grand Rapids, you might as well just go to Chicago. And I think a lot of people from Grand Rapids also came out for this match as well. But we ran into a ton of folks from St. Joe and Kalamazoo and Grand Rapids and Jackson and a bunch of places, really between here and Chicago, a couple folks from Detroit as well. And it just made me realize just how wonderful and nice Michiganders are, because the nicest people we ran into were all from Michigan. It just reminds me how beautiful and wonderful this state is.
Oh, 100%. And look, I enjoyed my time in Chicago, and I'm sure I'll have more things to share about it because I went specifically to try certain things that I know are coming to Metro Detroit. But I really want to have a word with Chicago drivers at some point, like a summit or a something. Because if there's a drawback to Chicago that I see that was kind of frustrating, it was the drivers.
Yeah, Michiganders are statistically some of the best drivers in the nation in terms of least amount of fatal accidents and stuff like that. And, different insurance companies and whatnot have put out these studies. Michigan drivers are great, and everywhere else they suck. I'm going to just stand on that. Great job.
49 states of driving suck, 1 state of driving awesome. Let's get into some local news. Detroit's Psychedelic Church has been raided. This happened over the week. Detroit police raided the Soul Tribes International Ministries on the west side. This is for the sale and distribution of psilocybin. They kind of do the magic mushrooms thing. Now, the church portrays this as healing with a variety of natural measures. On the other side, Detroit police and Detroit officials think very differently. I've got a statement in my inbox from Detroit City Council President Pro Tem saying blatant illegal activity will not be tolerated in District 1, and we thank enforcement agencies for addressing the concerns of our community. The city did not give any permission to be able to sell this stuff. Recently, the city decriminalized psychedelics. However, under state law and still under the city, it is illegal to distribute or to sell them. And this move, especially after this place got some media coverage, they got a big write-up, which, I know they invited it, but that's generally when you're in this kind of business, kind of like maybe not the best idea because this gets you automatic attention. But it also is a clear sign that Detroit will come after you for psilocybin, especially when it comes to sale and distribution, that it may have been decriminalized by the vote. And this is another instance of the vote is one way, the enforcement, as interpreted by some, is another.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we talk about District 1 and we talk about sort of the demographics out there and James Tate and his leadership in that district. And to be perfectly honest, and I hate to be this person, but they have not necessarily fallen into the letter of the law. Decriminalization does not mean it's legal for sale. That's just the law. That's how it works. I feel like obviously they, in the write-up, obviously in Metro Times, the members of this church were saying that we use this for rituals and this is part of our spiritual healing, but that doesn't matter. It is not legal for sale and distribution in the city of Detroit.
Or in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, or in the state of Michigan. And so I know a lot of people voted for decriminalization, and I think it's important that people sort of understand what that means. This just means you won't go to jail. That's it. You can still get a ticket. You can still get a fine. They can still confiscate your mushrooms or whatever, but you just won't go to jail. That's it.
For personal use only.
Yeah, and for personal use.
Anything beyond that, you're running a risk.
Exactly. I'm not shocked that this occurred, and I think one of the main things that is telling here is that you're already flying under the radar. And I mean this is talking to Soul Tribes Ministries, which is the organization that was operating out of that church on the west side. Obviously, you want to promote your church or your group or whatever, but they seized $700,000 in psilocybin mushrooms from this raid. That's a lot. There's a lot of mushrooms. And for me, I just think you have to be aware of the eyeballs that are brought onto you when you do this kind of stuff. This is devastating for this group. I mean, a loss of almost $750,000 in just product. We're not even talking about other things that may have been seized. We're not talking about if they took mescaline or ayahuasca or any of the other things that they may have had in the church. So I think it is a alarm bell for those who want to participate in psychedelics. Understand what the letter of the law is saying. And if you want more changes, then there needs to be more votes. But as of right now, it's one of those things where you got to just say, hey, man, that's what happens.
Does your view change because of the amount? Like if they had found like a little mason jar, in a freezer somewhere for their little ritual, do you think anyone would have cared as much as opposed to the amount of product that they found?
I think so. I'm not speaking for other people and for people who are proponents of psychedelics. I think they're going to feel salty about this no matter what. I think the amount changes the viewpoint in the eyes of the neutral and in the eyes of the lawmakers and the law enforcement agencies, because they're going to look at it and say, all right, $700,000 worth of mushrooms. Okay, that is more than what you would need for rituals. All right, this was set up for distribution. That's how they're going to look at it. It's hard to argue against that assessment. It's a lot of product.
If you've got feelings on this, I'd love to hear them. 313-789-3211 or dailydetroit@gmail.com. Let's stay on the west side and talk about Motor City Brewing Works. Their second location, set up on the Avenue of Fashion, really took a long time to get underway. I remember, Norris, going to their opening with former council member Roy McAllister and all the fanfare for this spot that's historic. It's a really neat building that, I had wished had gotten activated a lot earlier. It's right across from the now closed, unfortunately, Narrowway Cafe right there on Livernois, just north of 7 Mile. Motor City Brewing Works is a really popular brand locally. Some of their beers have been around for, since the mid-90s, but they never found their footing here, whether it was, some listeners have talked about, irregular hours. Others have been saying kind of like a mismatch in culture fit. I mean, for multiple reasons. I think this is a great illustration of like what works in one neighborhood may not work in another Detroit neighborhood, and you need to be kind of cognizant of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we're talking about Avenue of Fashion, let's just be clear, and I'm not going to mince words here. When you're talking about Avenue of Fashion, you are talking about a corridor of sort of staunchly supported Black-owned businesses. I just want to put that out there, and let's be very clear here. Black or Arab-owned businesses, Bucharest is over there too. The thing about Motor City Brewing Works is that I feel like this was a gross miscalculation of understanding the demographics, right? I think they looked at Sherwood Forest and said, oh, some of our people, and by our people, I mean, sort of hip, younger, childless folks, they're buying houses in Sherwood Forest in 2018, 2019. We should move over there. Pandemic hits, and now we can't necessarily finish the building. All right, we're post-pandemic. Here we are. We need to open up, do all this cool stuff. But now sort of the appetite for going out to bars is not what it was in pre-pandemic levels, right? We already see that that's starting to affect a lot of watering holes, so to speak, especially those in neighborhoods. And so, Motor City Brewing Works, I think, was a victim of not just the pandemic. I think it was a victim of culture. And I think also it was a victim of presumption. When they first put the sign up that they were going to be building the bar itself, the plaque had said something like coming uptown 2021. And I remember that people were posting on like Facebook and other social media like, yo, what the hell is uptown? Where is that? Because it's not here. And I think we misunderstand sometimes, or I think, no, I don't want to say misunderstand. I think we downplay how important the identity of some of these neighborhoods are to the locals. And that may have worked in Cass Corridor / Midtown because that place needed a rebrand and nobody really, I won't say nobody, but not as many people actually lived there. You're not going to do that on Avenue of Fashion. There are people who have been there for years, businesses that have been there for years, and that is a very near and dear thoroughfare to Northwest Detroit. And I just think it was a perfect storm of miscalculation.
You know, also, I think they would have maybe thought they would get some business from Ferndale as well because it's right there. But Ferndale has so many good options for this market for breweries. I mean, you've got Ferndale Project just down the street.
Down the street, right.
And it's like, I know it's not that much of a difference, but then you got to set yourself against all these places in Ferndale. And if you live in Ferndale, it's not like a city suburbs thing, really. It's just what's closer to you.
Absolutely.
And it's just right there to have all these options. You're going against really stiff competition, multiple layers of stiff competition in Ferndale for that market. And then you've got people in those neighborhoods that might be their target area already acculturated. Like when I stayed in the University District, man, like Ferndale was the center of a lot of stuff because it just was. It's just there. I went to Avenue Fashion all the time. You know, there's the Mire, all those other things, but you're going to go to downtown Ferndale more than you are downtown Detroit because it's just easier.
Yeah. And also, I just think when you look at that area, you got certain places, you got Good Times down the street and you got a few other clothing options. And it's just, you know, I'm not sure that this style of bar was going to be something that really hit because, listen, bougie Black folks love a good lounge. And, you know, a brewery and a lounge have very different vibes. And I think a lounge or a wine bar, if you just told me House of Pure Vin was opening a second location at this address, I'd be like, game over. That place is going to make money hand over fist because that's the demo. I just feel like a brewery it wasn't really the right amount of market research going into it. I think they saw some cheap land in an area that was popping that they were going to be able to go in and do a lot with. But, you know, the stars didn't align. And it makes me sad because more business is good, but I kind of didn't see it working from the beginning.
When it was announced in 2018, I remember people in the neighborhood groups being like, what is this Ghetto Blaster beer? And like Ghetto Blaster has been out since like 1995, but there was literally
But you ain't drink that in the hood, Jer. We didn't drink that in the hood.
No, that's my point. That's the gap right away where I was like, oh, this is going to be in trouble. Because if you've been in Detroit since 1995, and yet the residents have no idea about your signature thing that's carried all over the state, I was like, eesh, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just craft beer is a fairly new thing for folks living out here in the neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? We were still drinking Heineken up until the 2010s, okay? Like, I'm not trying to say that as a diss. It's just the market reality. And I didn't have Ghetto Blaster until I went to, my first dally, and I drank some at Bronx Bar. And we're talking about 2008, 2009 or something like that. Maybe even a little bit later. It just wasn't something that you saw in the neighborhoods like that. I just think there was some unfamiliarity with the brand, unfamiliarity with the product. And to be honest, I think they felt like if we just build it, all of our people will show up. And to your point, those people are in Ferndale and they got a ton of other places to go.
Yeah. And they may already have loyalty to that Midtown location, which had a different menu. Like, you know, there were just multiple factors here that didn't jive. But I think it's a good lesson because I have heard multiple stories here of all kinds of different businesses just kind of landing in neighborhoods of Detroit and not really knowing what that clientele actually wants and it being a miss. And it's a real frustrating because you see a lot of people put a lot of money toward it where it might work in a different area. Or, and I hate to say it, but it's true, like maybe it should have been in a suburb or somewhere else because that's business. You have to serve, like the people are going to buy your stuff. You can't really like will your way into an area. You know, it's got to be ready for whatever it is. And sometimes are just harsh realities you got to deal with that, whatever your dream might be.
But also at the same time, these businesses got to do a better job at getting those neighborhoods on board. right? You can't just plop yourself down in a neighborhood and do nothing to connect yourself to the neighborhood. And this is just facts, okay? You're not Chipotle. Chipotle could drop down in the middle of anywhere and people will come and buy and eat Chipotle, right?
Like they are in downtown Detroit.
Exactly. Everybody's happy about that.
Yeah.
But if you're opening a brewery or a bar or a wine lounge or a hookah lounge, I don't care. It behooves you to get out into the neighborhood, talk to the other surrounding business owners, talk to the guy who owns the gas station down the street, talk to the folks who live in the area that you see walking around, or throw a sign up and say, hey man, if you live in the neighborhood, you get 5% off. You can do a ton of stuff to get people in the area to come and patronize you. But if you just think you're just going to drop down and put out what is arguably a niche product, because craft beer is a niche product, it's not Miller Lite, you got to do a little bit more work. And I just didn't, from an outside perspective, I didn't see the work being put in of Brewing Works sort of inculcating themselves into the neighborhood.
I feel like that advice is good regionally too.
1,000%.
Because every single neighborhood, suburb, and unpopular opinion here, I think in a lot of areas where you don't have the forced stoppage of the growth of Detroit, because of home rule, there was a whole thing, we do a whole episode on it, where you had suburbs like running to the courthouse to like stop the expansion of the city of Detroit. It's part of the reason why it is the way it is. But like, there's an alternate timeline where a lot of these suburban cities, they're actually neighborhoods. And when you travel, you realize that a lot of suburban cities are about the size of bigger cities' neighborhoods.
Right.
And so that can also apply into those areas, especially if you want to build something from the ground up, because it's going to be hard. Like you said, if you're Chipotle, if you're talking, people are either going to like you or you're not. There's nothing you can really do. You can put out some discounts and stuff, and that would be great, but people are either going to like you or not. Their opinions of you are formed before you arrive.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to something like this, and the business owners that I see successful, especially in Detroit, when I talk to them, they are really prioritized on where they are, knowing who they're serving, and being personally available. That's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
But also important.
But, and I think a great example of this is you look at a restaurant like Ema that I go to all the time, right? So you got 3 very distinct locations. You got Midtown, you got Corktown, and you got, I believe it's Madison Heights is the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very different vibes. They serve different sort of purposes. The one in Madison Heights is very much so more grab and go. It's in a strip mall. It kind of understands what it is. The seating is not necessarily, super overwhelming. It's not really designed for that. It's designed for you to come and get your food and leave. Whereas Corktown and Midtown, you could tell this was made for you to come chill. Midtown is more super college-y. It's got bench seating and it's more communal. Whereas Corktown is like, come and sit here for 2 hours and enjoy yourself. Like, it understands, all 3 locations understand what they're trying to do in the context of that community. And it doesn't try to force its sort of rubric onto that community. And I think even just understanding place really helps you in that sense.
I want to give a shout out that Ema is one of the best looking strip mall places I have ever seen. And it got me on this path of realization. It's not that I hate mid-century modern. It's that mid-century modern has been like destroyed so many ways from Sunday in the suburbs.
Yeah.
They've done a great job at that Madison Heights location. For where it is and its setting, it looks amazing.
It does. I think it's a great way for people to sort of understand that different neighborhoods have different needs. And the best part is the owner, I see him in the restaurant. I see him in the Corktown location. I've seen him in the Midtown location. I see him talking to people. I see him up on the ladder fixing lights himself. Like, people like that kind of stuff here in Detroit and in the Midwest. They like to see that the ownership cares, that the ownership is available, that they are one, quote unquote, one of us, whatever that means. And, I think it helps to create a brand and a location or a series of locations that feel familiar and feel like you want to spend your money there with them. And I think that was an issue that Brewing Works was going to have at Avenue of Fashion, because I didn't see those same things happening.
Well, Norris Howard, so good to spend a Wednesday with you. Where can people find you on social media? And of course, you podcast other places too.
Yes, yes. You can find me at Great Laker Nora. That's Nori. Pretty much everywhere: Threads, Twitter, Instagram, and also come and give us a listen over at the new podcast, Football Furioso, that I host with myself and my brother. And Fletcher Sharp has even made an appearance on Football Furioso as well. So if you're into the Premier League and the Champions League and all that kind of stuff, slide over and give us a listen. You can find Football Furioso on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and soon to be YouTube Music, wherever you find your podcast.
That's actually a good bridge because people listening to this on Google Podcasts, your app's about to die. So that sucks, but you got to make a switch, and YouTube Music will be offering podcasts. In fact, we are listed in YouTube Music as well. So that's something ahead of you. If you got any questions, Engineer Randy is always here for you. And yeah, I love seeing the growth of so many podcasts. And people might think like, oh, well, people on your show. No, I want everybody to do everything and grow out this medium in Metro Detroit. And I think that it's absolutely great that everybody's getting together and making stuff that they're really interested in. Because I love soccer, absolutely, but there's only so much room for it in this show. Otherwise, we'd have to make it like daily soccer, and that's just not going to be.
Yeah, it ain't going to work. But if you want that, guys, come and check and listen to Football Furioso.
Go Nottingham Forest.
I'm going to pray for you this season, Jer.
With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.